We're in a series on framing your worldview. Y'all people don't look shocked with one-page outline. As I said, we've been in a series of reframing or framing your worldview for some weeks now. Your worldview is the way that you look at the world. It's the beliefs that you base all of your decisions on. Your worldview is how you see life, how you see death, how you see yourself. Your worldview includes how you see God and others, how you see money and sex and the past and the present and the future. In fact, everything or every area of your life. Now, everybody has a worldview, whether they realize it or not. It's often unclarified. It's often unspoken, but everybody has a worldview. Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is a worldview. It's a way of seeing the world, and actually there are 7 major worldviews. We talked about that in the first week of this series. If you base your life on a faulty worldview, the results are disastrous. Because every idea has a consequence. Even the silly ideas of life waste your time, and that wastes your life. So there's a consequence to literally everything you do. In the first week, we talked about how it's not enough just to be sincere. We talked about a number of different questions. Why does it matter what I believe? You can be sincere and sincerely wrong. If I had a glass up here and it's filled with what I think is water, and I'm sincere about it, I can drink it. But if it's poison, it's still going to kill me, no matter how sincere I am. I made my decision based on a false assumption. I based my decision on untrue data. So during this series, we've looked at 5 different questions. The first question was, why does it matter what I believe? That makes a major difference in your life. Then we looked at how do we know what's true? How do I know what's real? We've looked at 5 signs of truth decay in our society and 5 ways you can know the truth. You can actually test it and find out, is this really true? Is this really real? Does it square with reality? Then we looked at where did I come from? That has major implications in your worldview. The Bible says that God created everything. The Bible tells us that God thought of human beings first, but that He created us last. And that each one of us is a unique individual. You're not an accident. You were actually made in God's image. And God has a purpose and a plan for your individual life. Then we looked at how did the world get so messed up. The fact is we live on a broken planet. We looked at the reasons for which is our own sinful choices. And the result is we live on a broken planet where nothing works correctly. Nothing is perfect, folks. No person, no health, no marriage. Nothing is perfect on this planet. We looked at why God even allows this broken planet to go on for a little bit longer and the rationale behind that. Then we looked at what was the solution. What is the solution to all the problems in the world? We looked at a number of major different solutions that have been offered, but they have failed. Because honestly, the heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. It's inside me. And you cannot change the world by making a law to change the world. That does not work. You have to change people on the inside. And we looked at how God does change us on the inside. And we looked at the 5 things that Jesus Christ did on the cross are what changes us. They're the answer to the problems of our world. Now, based on all that we have looked at, I want us to ask one last question. I want us to answer it. So what? So what? In other words, how am I supposed to live in the world? Once I'm a Christian and I have a Christian worldview, how do I turn my creeds into deeds? My beliefs into action? How do my beliefs change my behavior? In other words, what am I going to do with what I now believe? How should I live in this world? Fortunately, God sent us a model on how to live in the world. 1 John 2:6 says, anyone who says he is a Christian should live as Christ did. In fact, that's one of the 5 purposes God has created us for. Yet, folks, we don't do it. We call ourselves followers of Christ. We call ourselves believers. We call ourselves Christians, but we don't always live the way Jesus did. The big question then is, if I am going to be in the family of God, I am going to live as Jesus did, how do you do that? What does it mean to live as Jesus did? Now, if you go through everything written about Jesus Christ in the Bible, if you read it all, if you read every word that Jesus said that was recorded, and you summarize it, it summarizes into 10 mega truths, 10 mega themes, 10 values. What I'm going to do over the next 2 or 3 weeks is I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes on the life of Jesus Christ. This is the 10 things that Jesus did in His life, and He wants you and me to do in our life, which is how should you live in the world. We're going to look at these 10 values. And as we look at them, I got an idea you're going to be as amazed as I was how counterculture every one of them is. How opposite of what the world says we're supposed to do, Jesus says to do. Jesus is the perfect model for living. See, He not only showed us how to do it, He gives us specific instructions. How do I learn to live like Jesus? You have to build certain values into your life. And here we'll begin. Number 1, to live like Jesus Christ means that I live with discernment. To live like Jesus Christ means that I live with discernment. What that means is to evaluate. You test things. You're discerning. You don't just accept whatever somebody tells you. You check it out. You don't automatically accept the world's values. You're not suckered in by popular culture. Folks, just because it's mentioned on some talk show or is on the cover of some magazine or people think it's hip or cool, No. You check it out. You're discerning. You evaluate everything. You ask things like, is this true? Does this square with reality? Is this God's worldview? Or is it just, at the most, a passing fad? The Apostle Paul, in the book of Romans, the 12th chapter, reminds us, don't become so comfortable with your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Folks, that's what Jesus is saying here. He says, I want you to think about the kind of life you're living. You need to be discerning. Notice Jesus in John, the 7th chapter, says, don't be nitpickers, but use your head and heart to discern what is right, to test what is authentically true. Jesus says, I don't want you to be a cynic. I don't want you to be a skeptic. I don't want you to be a nitpicker. I don't want you to be a legalist crank who runs around talking about everything in the world is bad. I don't want you to criticize everything, but he said, I do expect you to use your brain. God gave you a mind, and you're to use it. You're to be discerning and not just automatically believe everything that you hear or see or experience in life. He said, don't be a nitpicker, don't be a cynic, but use your mind. I'm not giving y'all an assignment in a long time. I want to give y'all one. Sometimes I want you to go back and read through the first 4 books of the New Testament. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the books that tell us most about Jesus. As you read those Gospels, find out how many times Jesus uses the phrase, watch out. It is one of his favorite phrases. Jesus says, watch out. Now, I'm not going to spoil all the fun for you, but there's a bunch of different things he says watch out for. For instance, did you know that Jesus says watch out for people who can take you to court? That's one of the things he said to watch out for. If you watch out for the things that Jesus says to watch out for, you're going to be a lot wiser. Now, depending on your translation that you're reading, instead of watch out, it may say beware, or be careful, or be on your guard. But he's just saying you need to be discerning. You don't just let things flow into your mind. Folks, the problem is today we're bombarded by the media. We've got radio and television and internet and iPods and iPhones and on and on and on. And we've got the media all around us. There's billboards and movies, and everything is constantly hitting us. After a while, we kind of let our guard down, and you let your mind start picking up a lot of different things. For instance, have you ever found yourself singing a song with words that are the exact opposite of your values? Folks, it wasn't long ago that I love to hear the modern music. Ed Sheeran, all of these different ones. I got some great songs. But I was listening to these, and Arlene one day, she said, Eddie, we were dating, and she said, do you ever listen to the words of those songs? I'm going to be honest, it was shocking. You know, as your pastor, I don't think it's appropriate for me to be listening to songs that said, I'm going to get drunk tonight and sleep around. I don't need something like that coming into my mind. What's happening? I was allowing another worldview to be put into my mind without even realizing. Simply because I love the music. It was a catchy tune. Today we've got a thing we call entertainment. A lot of entertainment is watching people do stuff that you know is wrong. You'd never do it yourself. Sleeping around with somebody else's husband or wife, or getting drunk and shooting people. We watch stuff all the time that we would never do ourselves, and we call it entertainment. Jesus said you need to be discerning and know what you are allowing in your mind. I want to take a little survey. You don't have to raise your hand. How many of you believe everything that you read in the newspaper? How many of you believe everything that you read in magazines, that you hear on the radio, that you watch on TV, that you see in movies, that's on the internet? How many of you would say, I believe everything God says is true? I believe this is God's Word, that it's true. Here's my question. I'm including me in this. Why do we spend more time listening and watching and reading something that we don't believe than something we do? Live with discernment. The Bible says in Luke 11, make sure that the light you think you have is not really darkness. You may be thinking, I'm doing the right thing, but you're actually operating off of the world's value system that has been programmed into your mind through radio and television and music and books, and you're brainwashed. And you just automatically think this is the right way to do it. So Jesus said, make sure that the light you think you have is not really darkness. If I want to live like Jesus, I've got to be discerning. Number two, if you're going to live like Jesus Christ, then you've got to learn to live with integrity. Now, what is integrity? Most people do not understand this word. In fact, if you ask them to give you a synonym, they would say integrity means being honest. It means telling the truth. And yes, that's part truth. Telling the truth is part of integrity. But integrity means a whole lot more than being honest. What integrity means is wholeness. It's all together. It comes actually from a mathematic word that means one unit, whole. It means whole, which is the opposite of segregating your life into segments. What integrated or integrity means is that your lifestyle is the same. In other words, you don't act one way with one group. For example, like this is how I act in church. But this is how I act when I'm out with my buddies. But this is how I act at work. This is how I act at home. And this is how I act when I'm over here and nobody knows me. You wear different masks and you fake it and you pretend. You play role and you're a hypocrite. That is a lack of integrity. It's when you segment your life off. You can be honest and still lack integrity. Why? Because you can be honest in one area, and yet another area of your life, you're in total denial because it's all messed up. Just because you're honest in one area does not mean that you have integrity, because that involves every area of your life. You don't segment your life. You remember a few weeks ago when we talked about the Titanic myth? that before the Titanic, all the boats were made with one integrated hull. They were one unit. So if a ship ran into an iceberg and it knocked a hole in it, the water came in and the ship sank. So the Titanic was supposedly to be unsinkable because they got this idea. We'll just separate the hull. We'll make it into segments. And if the ship happens to run into an iceberg, it could theoretically take on water in a certain number of compartments, but it wouldn't sink the ship. Now that sounds logical. But a hole in the boat is a hole in the boat is a hole in the boat. It's going to sink eventually. Let's say that you are out in a rowboat fishing. And you look up, and I'm sitting over in the back, and I've just pulled out a drill, and I start drilling a hole in the boat. And you say, wait a minute, what are you doing? I said, well, man, this is my space. I'm not hurting you. This is what I want to do. This is my end of the boat. No, folks, it's going to sink the whole boat. A hole in a boat is going to sink the boat. You may be saying, I'm drilling a hole right now, but it's not going to sink my business. It's not going to sink my career. It's not going to sink my family, because it's just one little segment of my life. Folks, when you start segregating your life into, okay, this is my reading life. This is my business life. This is my secret life. You're setting yourself up for a lack of integrity, because it's not all integrated. Now, folks, it's not easy to live with integrity today, because everything in our society teaches us to put our lives into segments. You can remember, you got this PTA over here, and you got this other thing over here, and this other thing over here. We all struggle with the issue of bringing all of our life into a whole. So let me be clear. Integrity is not perfection. If you have to be perfect to have integrity, nobody's going to have it. Because there's no perfect people on this planet. Nothing is perfect on earth. So you don't have to be perfect to have integrity. You just have to be exactly what you appear to be. The way I talk to you is the way I talk to my kids. The way I talk to my kids is the way I talk to my friends. The way I talk to my friends is the way I talk to strangers. I don't act different ways with different groups of people. What you see is what you get. Jesus said in Luke 11, if you're filled with light, in other words, you're not hiding anything. If you're filled with light with no darkness, that means there's no corners of your life that you said, okay, God, you can have all of this out here, but this is my little corner. This is for me. If you are filled with light with no darkness, then your whole life will be radiant. What's he saying? The result of integrity is illumination. Folks, when you have integrity, you shine like a star in a dark night. That's why God tells us to live with integrity. Jesus said in Matthew 5:13, you are the world's salt to make it tolerable. If you lose your flavor, what happens to the world? God says that Christians are to be the salt of the world. Folks, there are two primary purposes for salt. One is a preservative. It keeps everything from rotting. And the other is seasoning. It makes things taste better. Now, why does God leave Christians in the world once they're saved? Why didn't He just instantly take us to heaven? He leaves us on this planet to be preservatives so that the world does not completely become rotten. And He also leaves us here for seasoning, to make it taste better. And the only way you can do that is if you have integrity. The third way to live like Jesus is to live with humility. To live with humility. There is discernibility, there is integrity, and there is humility. Again, humility is the word that most people misunderstood. A lot of people think that humility is saying, I'm no good. I'm really nothing. I'm just a bunch of junk. Folks, Jesus didn't die for junk. If you want to know how much you're worth, you look at Jesus with His hands outstretched on the cross, and He said, this is how much you are worth. When you go around saying, I'm nothing, and you're poo-pooing yourself, that's actually a form of false humility, which is really a form of pride. It's insecurity that says, I want you to notice me, so I'm going to tell you how lousy I am. Folks, humility is not false modesty. Humility is not being quiet and reserved. Humility is not denying the strength that God has given you. In word, humility is dependence. Humility is depending on God. The more humble you are, the more you depend on God, and the less you depend on yourself. That's what humility is all about. That's why in the very first beatitude of the first sermon that Jesus preached, the Sermon on the Mount, the very first sentence says this, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? It means to be humble. Poor in spirit means, God, I admit I don't have it on my own. God, I'm not going to make it in life. I'm not going to accomplish what you want me to accomplish. I'm not going to reach my goals. I'm not going to be the man or the woman that you want me to be unless you are with me and walk with me and help me. That's poor in spirit. That's being humble. Saying, God, I can't do it on my own. Jesus said, God blesses those who realize their need for Him. That's humility. It's depending on God every second. Now, why is humility so important? Because without it, you have so much stress in your life. The reason you get stressed out is a lack of humility. Now, what do I mean by that? The two greatest causes of stress are these. The number one cause of stress in your life is trying to control the uncontrollable. Trying to control things that you cannot control gets you stressed out. It gets you worried. Folks, the truth is, most of your life is out of control. Now, you can control your attitude. You can control your response, but you cannot control what's going to happen to you next week. Those circumstances are beyond your control, so they stress you out. You have no control of what is going to happen to you the rest of your life. But the more you need to control, the more stressed you get. The need to control is evidence of insecurity. When somebody tries and has a high need for controlling, it means one thing. They have high insecurity. The more insecure a person is, the more they try to control everything because they're so afraid. They don't want you to know they're afraid, but they're trying to control it so they don't have to be afraid. The more confident you are, the more relaxed you are. You learn to hold things with an open hand. Your confidence is not based on controlling everything. So your stress becomes lower and lower. The second great source of stress is the lack of trusting God. Whenever you don't trust God, your stress goes up. Your worry goes up. Your anxiety goes up. And folks, your peace of mind goes in the toilet. It falls apart. So you're depending on yourself instead of depending on God. Now, where's the antidote? The antidote to stress is humility. And a good definition of that is in our next text, Matthew 11:29. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary, burdened, and burned out, and I will give you" what? A whole lot of more work? No. "And I will give you rest." And then he says, "Take my yoke upon you." Folks, he's not talking about an egg yolk. He's talking about the thing that attaches two oxen together to pull a wagon. Why? What's the purpose of a yoke? To have the burden. So instead of one ox pulling the wagon, you've got two oxen, because they're yoked together. Folks, we're not supposed to go through life trying to pull everything on our own. We're not supposed to try to solve all the problems ourselves. God never meant that. Jesus said, "I want you to yoke up with me. I want you to put your yoke on, and we will pull this thing together." And you know, he's got a lot more strength than we do. Here is the thing about it. When you pull together, you have to go at the same pace Jesus goes. If you've got two oxen yoked together, one can't go faster than the other. One can't go one direction and the other another direction. When you are pulling the load of your life all by yourself, you have a tendency either to go too fast or to go in the wrong direction or wind up in a ditch. Some of you have been there several times. When you are yoked to Jesus and He is pulling the load with you, folks, it's lighter. He's going to go at just the right pace because He knows what's the best pace for you. He's also going to keep you going in the right direction, and there's no way that He's going to let you run into a ditch. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary. You're burdened and you're worn out and you're tired and you're stressed." And He said, "I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." What does that humility produce? "And you will find rest for your soul." If you're stressed out today, the answer to your stress are the three things in this verse. Come to Christ, give up control, learn to trust. That's it. The antidote to stress in your life is come to Christ, give up control, learn to trust. And I want to remind you, you may have to do that about 50 times a day. God, I'm bringing this problem to you. Yes, Jesus, I'm bringing this same problem to you. I'm not going to try to control it, God, so I'm giving it back to you. I'm not going to control it. I'm giving it back to you. I'm not going to worry about it, but I'm going to learn to trust you. Folks, when we really start practicing that, your stress level goes down. Come to Christ, give up control, and learn to trust. That's another word for humility. That's real humility. So to live like Jesus means that I live with discernibility, I live with integrity, and I live with humility.